This week's news from the tubes and F5 Live is proudly powered by Malwarebytes. Whether you use a PC, a Mac, or a mobile device, Malwarebytes Premium is their strongest protection ever. It fights threats that traditional antivirus software can't stop, as well as things like worms and trojans and exploits and bots and a whole lot more. It allows you to use your computer and mobile devices with confidence and peace of mind. To learn more and to get a special price, you can go to f5live.tv/malwarebytes. So, legal topics it is. Google has been dealing with anti-competitive and antitrust complaints across the globe. Even we've seen special legislation passed in many places targeting Google in particular. You know, we kind of always go back to Spain's Google tax on Google News that ended up going away because they just pulled out of the country entirely. But when it comes to search, Google always seems to be in trouble. The fact that they include their own services, sometimes prioritizing them, has annoyed people across the globe, both users and governments. And this week we have two different instances of governments being annoyed by that business practice. The first is here in the United States. There is a new bill. It's not Google specific, but it would certainly it's certainly targeted at Google as one of its targets. It's called the Ending Platform Monopolies Act. And one of the things that they talk about is search specifically. The end result of this bill is questionable. It's kind of a continuation of the campaign that Elizabeth Warren ran during 2020, where she said that Google, Facebook, and I feel like two others, I don't remember who now, should be broken up. She had a graphic. It's in our graphics library somewhere. This is kind of a continuation of that theory. I don't know that a single bill would manage to break up a company like Google, let alone Google, Facebook, and whoever else they had on their target. But it is definitely, I think the thing that matters is that it's a sign of a shift, right? In legislation where they're actually looking pretty hard at Google instead of holding their hand a little bit like had happened in the past. What do you think, Abram?
Yeah, I mean, but I don't see these things going anywhere.
No.
I just don't. I don't think, I mean, whether I, you know, obviously there's some concerns about, there's legit concerns about a business as large as Google, which basically has the market power to make sure that like the advertising they sell, uh, their ad network, their stuff does better than other people's. Uh, but the I think I think they would have. I think if the government is going to do something, they would have to do it with a bit of a softer touch, because I just think that the it's not going to, any attempt to break up a company or use antitrust law is going to be very difficult. We saw what happened with Microsoft 20 years ago,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and I just don't foresee with the balance of different courts that we have, and who's sitting on them,
Yeah.
and the balance of power that we have, there being enough of a consensus across the both sides of the aisle
Yeah.
to do this, even if let's say politicians on both sides of the aisle don't maybe dislike some of these companies like Google or Facebook. uh, I don't think that they agree on how to regulate them, or with the idea of breaking them up.
Right.
So I think that the best that they could do is try to do things uh, perhaps via consent decree or something like that. Like, look, you you got to take this small step to ensure a little bit more fairness,
Yeah.
uh, because there's just not an like in the EU there is an appetite for this. In the EU there is consensus. So
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about that one next.
right, there is consensus, but in the US there's not, and
Yeah.
you need very significant consensus to make this type of a sweeping change to a large business, because you need to make sure that, first of all, when it goes all the way through the courts and it goes to Supreme Court, uh, there's a good chance it'll be upheld.
Right.
When the balance of power shifts and there's another party has more, more in charge, because these things could take, you know, years and years and years and years and
Yeah.
uh, many election cycles to go through. So
Yeah.
I,
And
I would not.
it's been a long time since the the party that holds the White House manages to hold the House
Yeah,
midterm. So,
yeah, right,
the
right,
House is likely to switch in a year. So they have a very short window to try and use a
right. But
very
then,
slim majority to simply get stepped on in
right, right.
12
It just
months.
it's also, it would
Yeah.
have to make it through. It'd have to make it through the filibuster in the Senate
Hmm.
right now. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not gonna, they shouldn't even try. It's not gonna
Yeah.
happen. So
I
if they
totally
want to,
agree, but I think the Ending Platform Monopolies Act is more of a political statement than it is an actual
right,
attempt at a successful bill
right,
to kind of show we're on to you. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like a bit of a "we're on to you" statement, more than it is that anybody expects this to go anywhere. And I looked up the graphic, by the way. Amazon was the third company that I was missing. Her graphic was, "It's time to break up Amazon, Google, and Facebook."
right, right,
So,
right, exactly. So it's just it's unlikely to go
yeah,
anywhere, because there's
yeah,
just not there would need to be a significant political consensus to do it, and there absolutely is not.
yeah,
It is, I
100%.
think most people would agree, it is sad that it is of some concern that one company has such a dominant position in search, because like search is the big application on the internet, and to be fair, Bing does not have a significant market share.
Hmm.
There's really nobody else with a significant market share. DuckDuckGo isn't worrying anybody, right?
Yeah,
Um,
Brave Search isn't worrying anybody.
right.
Although I've
So,
been using Brave Search and I really like it.
right. I mean, there's people who like these things, but the thing is, if you're running a business and you want your business to be found, and that's what
Hmm.
people care about, then you optimize for Google. You don't optimize for Bing. You don't optimize for Brave. You care
Right.
about your rankings in Google.
Right. Absolutely. And as a multi-year, long-term Bing user, since before it was even called Bing, I I mean, I have done optimizations on PLUGHITZ Live for Bing, but we focus on Google. I have not, until the image, the screenshot that I grabbed for the header image of this article, I have not done a Google search in years. So, and I still worry about optimizing the website for Google. So yes, absolutely, because it's the way to be found, and it's a shame. But you mentioned the EU, and it's it's our next bit of this story. The EU does seem to be a little ahead of the U.S. If we're saying that this is a slow moving arrow, which it may or may not be. The EU is way down the line on this topic because they started an investigation in 2009 that filed charges in 2017 specifically about search, and Google's placement of Google shopping results, which at the time was just a pay to play. It was just an advertising thing. It wasn't an aggregate like it is kind of today. And they prioritized Google shopping results inside of Google search. Their equivalent of an antitrust case was filed in 2017. Google lost. Another appeal was just lost this week, upholding the $2.8 billion fine. Google only has one more possible appeal ahead of it, and that is to the EU's equivalent of the Supreme Court, which they call the European Court of Justice. And based on past track record and current sentiment in the EU, like Abram just mentioned, it is unlikely that they will win there either. So $2.8 billion. I mean, it's a lot for you and I. It's less for them, but $2.8 billion is still a lot of money. That's about half of YouTube's total revenue this past quarter. So I mean that's a hit to the pocketbook. So they will almost certainly appeal. We'll see if the court takes up the appeal or not, but I don't know. It doesn't seem likely to me, since, like you said, Abram, the sentiment there is different than it is here. So we will see, and as always, we will keep our eye on the topic. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this episode of F5 Live Refreshing Technology. If you did, please subscribe to the channel down below, and of course hit the notification bell, because we know that subscriptions don't mean much on YouTube anymore. If you've got topics that you'd like us to talk about in the future, please comment them down below. And if you'd like to not follow us on YouTube, there's lots of ways that you can follow along with our content by going to plughitslive.com/subscribe. There you'll see all of our shows and all of the ways that you can watch, listen, and follow along.